gubernatorial election. It's been back-to-back a very insightful discussion. So let's go beyond the votes being cast and, counted as well. There's another problem that we need to tackle here, and that is misinformation. In today's digital age, the spread of fake news, unverified claims, and manipulated narratives can significantly influence voter perceptions and disrupt the democratic process. So how can we separate fact from fiction in this high-stakes election? And so to help us unpack this critical topic, we're joined by two special guests. Our very first guest will be Allwell Okpi. He's a researcher and community manager at Africa Check, an organization dedicated to promoting accuracy in public discourse. Wendy, thanks for joining us. We appreciate you for coming on. Also joining us is Bernard Akede. He is live all the way from Ogun State, covering, from that, it looks like he's back home. That looks like his living room. Bernard is back home. Bernard, I thought you were supposed to be covering.
It's right next door. So
it's right next. Bernard, welcome on to. We appreciate you for coming on, as well as Allwell. Both of you, a very good morning to you. Let's get started, shall we? And let me start with you, Allwell, and talk about just from observing the elections, what are some of the common types of misinformation you observed in this election cycle, and how did they have any impact in the voting exercise?
Well, we began essentially looking at the claims around this election all the way from when the two leading candidates had their debates, and of course it was essentially claims about what one person did and the other person did. Well, most of the claims which we did check. And some of them were some of the things that are quite difficult to prove because there was this claim about certain withdrawal from the security votes. The PDP candidate is in the governor they now set it out of money for security vote around the time that was the election. But then most of the other claims were around achievement, which some of them were correct. One particular one which was incorrect had to do with a claim that there was no functional industry in Ondo State. That was obviously not correct. Which functional companies working at the industrial park. But on election day, IELTS election, generally I would say that this, in terms of misinformation, this was a lot quieter compared to the Edo election, and that probably has to do with the fact that there was a bit of less interest in this election compared to that one, and so the narratives weren't very strong as well. But then we did see also information around candidates, there's dropping. One particular one had to do with they said that Labour Party was not on the ballot, and that was absolutely false. Yes, the candidate of the Labour Party was disqualified shortly before the election, but then another candidate was put in his place. So a Labour Party was indeed on the ballot, but that was one major claim that circulated on election morning, that it wasn't there.
Now, Allwell, let's zero in on that instance. Now, the Labour Party instance and that disqualification story. Now, we also have been seeing the returning numbers, and we can see that the Labour Party numbers aren't doing too well. Let's face facts. Now, do you think this was as a result of the information coming at the time that it did regarding the disqualification or the replacement, or could it have been perhaps maybe because of the party, or rather the candidate that was substituted with? Which was it? Was it the information and the timing of that information, or was it the candidate?
Well, I mean, at this time, we can't really now say, when this kind of thing happened, maybe the party might be able to say, oh, maybe it's because of all of that change that happened. That's why we didn't do too well. Maybe if it didn't happen, we might not know whether they will have done better than this. But then the fact is there that misinformation or counter information around the participation of a candidate obviously would affect the outcome of the election relative to that party. I mean, imagine, you had made up your mind to vote for the candidate of the party, only to hear about, some hours to the election or just a day to the election that he's no longer the candidate of the party. And then even with the way information circulates, that there's also that tendency that there will be doubts about whether it is true or not, and all that. So obviously that would have had a significant effect on whether people were going to vote for Labour Party or not. But I mean, the fact that because when the information came out that he had been disqualified, there were people who did not believe it. There were people who were trying to counter that narrative until we did confirm that indeed he was disqualified, and then another candidate had been put there. So, but then I will also go with a narrative that maybe, that then means that Labour Party is no longer participating in this election, and we did that, and that was the narrative that went on with that claim that Labour Party was no longer on the ballot because of that disqualification, and which was very, very untrue, and obviously that will have had impact on people who will have decided to vote for Labour Party. They might just say, okay, maybe let me not vote at all, or maybe let me vote for another party.
But many thanks for that. Bernard, you covered the elections, the local government elections yesterday in Ogun State. And from your report, there are a lot of breakdowns in the processes which sort of hampered on the election. For the sake of our viewers and those who had not seen that report, just help us reel out some of the things you observed in terms of the breakdown.
Thank you again for having me. First of all, we should understand that local government elections are completely different from state government elections or even federal elections, definitely. And that came to play perfectly yesterday. To start with, and I think the most obvious issue that the election had, and even the commission's chairman, in a video I saw, because we weren't able to reach him physically while we were in the field, he was also in other parts of the state, he did acknowledge that they had issues with logistics. And that was, as a matter of fact, that alone can make or mar an election. It can make an election successful or completely unsuccessful. As at about 10:25, when we got to one of the local government secretariats, materials were just leaving. So at 10:25 a.m., we still had electoral. A returning officer giving instructions to electoral officers. We still had vehicles in that particular premises just getting ready to move out. And just as I predicted in my very first live report from yesterday, if as at that time the electoral materials had not left that premises, the ripple effect will clearly be felt all across the different polling units and wards in that particular local government. And if the same happened across other local governments, then we'll be expecting the same results. Lo and behold, we did go out and that was the same thing. If you saw my report, you'll see there were certain places where people who already had been told to come early arrived as early as 7:30 a.m. and had to wait till 11:22 a.m. before some of them could start voting. Some people sent us videos, onto our X handle, that's News Central, where some people had to leave the polling units. According to one of the videos I saw, people claimed that as late as 3 p.m., they still hadn't voted. And so they had to leave. That was one. Secondly, one of the polling units we visited, one gentleman who I interviewed there, and was in my report as well, said that when the ballot papers, the materials came, the ballot papers were being counted, and there were just about 100 pieces 100 ballot papers in the booklet that was brought. However, the people who were registered in that unit were close to 1,000 or over 1,000. Now, in his words, just about 10% of the numbers, of the total numbers of people who were registered, is what they had as ballot sheets to vote with. So even if people don't show up, even if voter apathy was high, which is another thing that we'll talk about maybe, it still is no reason, for them not to have the right number. As a matter of fact, a little bit over the number of registered voters in every, have over the number of voting sheets should be either the right number or slightly over the number of registered voters in each particular polling unit or ward, so that if anything goes wrong, you have more ballot papers to work with as regards having way less ballot papers than the candidates who are, or rather than the people who are supposed to vote. So among that and several other reasons, but basically those two were the most pressing ones that we saw. But the most pressing issue was the delay and the lateness of the movement of materials across the state.
For a state independent electoral commission, right? I mean, INEC is a completely different conversation, but the state is run by, it's an independent electoral commission run by the state government, and they did have ample time to prepare. And so one begs to ask the question, in this breakdown, who does it indict, INEC or the state government? And what does it say about the preparedness for whether or not they can be able to handle local government elections?
I think in this case, of course, the blame should go to the state. First of all, to the State Electoral Commission, which of course is under the state government itself. So the Electoral Commission of the state should have handled their business properly. I saw a video where the chairman of the Electoral Commission came out apologizing, stating that yes, they can confirm that they had logistical issues in his words, but that so far so good. It was a very peaceful election. Yes, it was peaceful, but that clip you're seeing right there is where the lady was counting the sheets, and the gentleman complained that it was just about 100 sheets they had there as regards about 1,000 people who were registered, in that area. So yeah, the blame should, I believe, go to the doorstep of the Electoral Commission of the state, and then in relation to that, also go to the state government. And then, which brings me to the next thing you said concerning INEC. Now, there was another gentleman who completely wanted to be anonymous in our reports, and he said perhaps it's time, of course these conversations are ongoing already, but that perhaps it's time to ask INEC, the national body, to wade into local government election matters, and simply because, again, when it comes to local government election, it's controlled by the state, so the state can do or undo when it comes to local government election. I remember that we're still having the conversation about local government autonomy. So if local government autonomy is going to be a thing, if local governments are going to be able to control their funds by themselves, then there should be cause for concern, because like it or not, the state still has some kind of power when it comes to elections concerning local government. So yes, maybe now is the time to lift the volume of our voices concerning having INEC wade into local government elections, so that certain issues like the ones we saw yesterday will completely be avoided. And then again, we know that INEC has the robustness, has the ability, probably has the budget, the size, the staffing, to control such kind of issues should they arise. So yes, again, maybe it's time we invite INEC. Maybe it's time that our voices get louder. Maybe it's time that INEC actually does either completely take charge or be, part participant when it comes to local government elections.
Bernard, I'm going to talk about voter apathy now, which you raised. Yes, we're going to talk about it. And I'm going to bridge this between you and Mr. Allwell here when it comes to information or misinformation. Let's look at voter apathy and voter education. The apathy that was witnessed yesterday in Ogun State, do you think that it was because of the fact that perhaps maybe people were just disenfranchised, or did they even know how much of a toll they hold when it comes to the governance, especially from the local government level? If politics in Nigeria is run from the grassroots level, then you would think that there would be much more fervor, much more interest in the local government level of politics, but we see that that is not the case. Is it because people are not educated enough to know this? Is it because political parties or candidates are taking advantage of the non-awareness of the people to perpetrate all these crimes that we see, like rigging or vote buying? what do you think? I want Mr. Allwell to tell first before you will give us your opinion and observation actually from Ogun State instance. But Mr. Allwell, what do you think about this?
Well, I think voter apathy generally is, yeah, I mean, one of the reasons will be also, the perception that people have about elections, right? About, whether it's even worth it to go out there to vote on election day, because if there's a narrative, there's the understanding that, oh, maybe well, no matter what we do, well, no matter whether we go out to vote or not, at the end of the day, they are going to rig the election. They are going to, our vote is not going to count. Then obviously a lot of people might just, well, I think I just take the day to rest at home and not bother to go out. So the perception of the citizens about the electoral process is a major factor, and if we're going to begin to repair that, then we need to really look at how narratives around elections go, and also, of course, in the midst of it, deal with the disinformation that goes along with it. Because whether no matter how you want to manipulate election, one major way is to control the narratives that around it, and which then influences the voters, and then one of the outcomes, one of the sums of that is that people might just decide not to vote, and that's why we keep having each voter apathy. And really, if you look at the trend, it just seems, even though a lot more people are getting more aware of election, but it seems the apathy seems also to be on the increase. But it's something that needs to be looked at, even from the national level. I was looking at really how to ramp up voter education to ensure that people actually know why they should go out to vote in the first place, and then the electoral body, everyone involved, do what they need to do, so that at least let not be that people just feel that the process is not worth it, and so there's no need to go out and vote.
Now, Bernard, from your observation yesterday in Ogun State, was the apathy caused by a lack of interest or a lack of information?
I think it was a bit of both, and I also like to agree with what Allwell said. I'll start with a lack of interest. Clearly, you can tell from many elections we've seen, election in, election out, people are beginning to lose interest. In governance and government matters, basically, or government and governance, matters. Just like Allwell said, there are those who strongly believe that whether or not we come out to vote, the result has been pre-decided. However, it's important because your votes do count. It would be very, very difficult for a party to say they want to rig an election or for results to change if you obviously see that numbers who came out to vote were very high. The people who voted for a certain party were quite large, and people are quite vocal about it. To change such results will be difficult. So whether or not people believe that voting results have been pre-decided, their votes, still matter. Let me use the word matter here, not necessarily count, because that's still argumentative. But their votes still matter. So if you come out in numbers, you have a voice to start with. They say if you don't buy the ticket, you can't win the lottery. So coming out is the first step. And then talking about information side, yes, I think our people still are not well informed or adequately informed, should I put it that way. On the side of the Electoral Commission, be it state or federal, we have to keep hammering on the reasons why people should vote, hammering on the fact that elections are going to hold, hammering on that elections have consequences. So whether you vote for the right party or the wrong party, there are consequences. Also, if you do not vote, you have made a choice already, and there are consequences. Now, I'm also going to step away from the electoral commissions, whether state or federal, and come to the to the political parties themselves. You owe a duty to your party followers, right? To your supporters to constantly and continuously and adequately educate them about the elections that are forthcoming, right? Educate them about the reason why you as a party have so-so agenda to come out and contest in the first place, why you have so-so candidates or candidates, that you are pushing forward, why you feel that your party can do better, and why the people have to come out behind you to cast their votes. There's one particular gentleman I interviewed who's a government teacher and a lecturer, and he started by saying that it is clear that, when it comes to governance or government in the classroom and a theoretical part, it's completely different from what we see, physically on the streets. That the presence of government is not being felt in his community, and that's why he decided to come out and run for councillorship. But to his greatest disappointment, the people did not come out to vote. So it's about time we moved away from our keypads and just chat and talk about the things that are going wrong and come out and cast our vote. Eventually, what will happen is the choices or the leaders or the people who eventually get elected or get voted into power are selected by a very few number of people, and then they will have to govern the larger majority of people. But guess the worst part, it's not just the number of people, it's the kinds of people who come out to vote. So it's easier to convince the people who are the lower cadre of the society, and forgive me for using that term, but that's the truth. Convincing them to come out to vote, encouraging them to come out to vote, and then they come out to vote. Whereas those people who are more educated, probably higher class, higher position, sit behind their keypads, press their phones, and complain about what's going wrong. Watch what the journalists are putting up on screen, have their voices heard behind the scene, but not coming out to do anything. So again, it's a bit of both. It's a bit of, the information part and then the interest part. Now, the two parts have to come together and work hand in hand. The Electoral Commission, the political parties have to come hand in hand to inform the people, first of all, and then the people themselves have to know that even if they think that their votes don't count, as I said earlier, their votes do matter. Their presence matters.
So how can we do this, right? Because I'm trying to jog my memory back as far back as 2016, far back as, let's see now, when was Goodluck Jonathan's run? When he was running for office the first time, that would be 2013, 2012.
A long time ago.
I'm correct. In all those times, there were voter education, right? There was amped voter education, and there were CSOs as well as the politicians and those who were running for office who called and asked that Nigerians cast their vote, and we've seen musicians as well and influencers come out to even put songs to ask you to cast your vote. Now, if we jog our memory back to 2023, it's also the same situation. And we saw, first, I've seen Articulate, but I've never seen a movement like Obedient. And I don't think we've ever seen it in the history of our politics, right? So much so that they were able to garner the youth to go out to register to get their voter's card. So much so that there was a Get Ready With Me videos to go get my PVC on TikTok. I remember those videos. I cannot forget them. They wake up in the morning, they get dressed, and they go to queue up to get their PVC. And so what would it take to actually see that shift in mindset that we want to see in our time? And I'm going to start with you, Allwell, because you are at the CSO and NGO end, and I'll take it to Bernard.
All right. I mean, it's still boils down to of the information, the narrative that is out there. It just to even try to manage the misinformation and disinformation around the election, which obviously we is having impact in the way our electoral process have been going. That's been why we came together as in the country to form the Nigeria Fact Checkers Coalition just before the election, and the aim that is us to ensure that we are monitoring how things are going. Information around the election is very critical, and so if we're going to see any kind of change in the behavior, then it's something that everyone will have to look at. How do we communicate around these elections, right? I mean, you about the obedience, the different movements that around the election. I mean, their success was based on the level of information they were able to push out about and the possibilities of changes in the country and all of that, and that message obviously got through to quite a number of people, and we saw how the voting went, right? But then of course it also shows that probably that the information also did not get to certain sections of the country, and really this is another thing which every stakeholder in this electoral process have to take into account, that Nigeria is so diverse, and if we're doing voter education or putting our information around the election in whatever way, we must consider the fact that there are so the demographic, the different cultural considerations and that needs to go into it. There are a lot of people who are illiterate, and a lot of people who need to be read in their local languages and all of that. And then of course, considering different geopolitical zones and all that, it has to be a very holistic approach to really put out the information that appeals to every segment of our society as a country, and to begin to get people to even have the interest, right, to come out to vote, and then also ensure that narratives around the election, which could influence people negatively, are curtailed, and it's not something that fact checkers or journalists can do alone. The electoral body themselves, the politicians, the political parties, everyone must come together to make it happen. Because if you have a situation where some stakeholders are actively pushing disinformation, actively pushing false narrative, that obviously will be counter whatever impact that we're trying to make. Then you'll see that whatever effort that is put into ensure that people are aware of their rights to vote and the need for them to come out to vote, it's that effort is sort of counteracted by other stakeholders who are completely out to push the opposite
well, we are having choppy network
direction. So we have to get the electoral process to work, right? And then everyone, begin to caution themselves about how they communicate around.
Right, Bernard, if you want to reply to that question.
Yes, definitely. While I agree with what Allwell has said, I want to add something there now. Just like what you said, Judith, the last elections, we did see, I only saw a huge use of social media. We saw people coming out, we saw influencers, recording, themselves coming out to pick their PVCs, coming out to vote and all of that. However, here's something that happened. Now, even in Lagos here, we saw that in some places where people actually tried to go out to vote or even to get their PVCs, people were attacked. People were hurt, people were harmed. And these are things that would deter people from coming out a second time. Not just because that they were, physically affected, but because people who hurt them, there was nothing done to those people. Now, there has to be consequences to certain things for people to have the confidence to come back and participate again. It's one thing for people to say that, oh, we were attacked. I mean, remember what happened in the Ajah area? Remember what happened in some parts of Lekki where ballot boxes were scattered, ballot papers were destroyed, people were physically attacked, and sometimes even with weapons. But the question now is, how many people do you know? I'm throwing this back at you guys. Mm-hmm. How many people do you know? How many cases have you heard of people being arrested, being arraigned in court for electoral malpractices? for snatching of ballot boxes, for destroying ballot materials. How many of them have been arraigned in court? How many of them have been found guilty and taken to jail? Even when we have these people's pictures, videos, images circulating social media for years, as they say, the internet never forgets, right? But there's been no justice. And so that's one reason, I think that's one reason why we will continue to see voter apathy, why the numbers will continue to drop and to dwindle. And it was one major concern because people feel, well, first of all, there may be some kind of systemic disenfranchisement, like it or not, such that people who were attacked the last time, they still have those scars on their bodies to remind them of what happened when they came out to vote. However, the people who put those scars on their body have moved on. So there's that unfair treatment. There's the part of the government, the part of the security agencies, the part of the Electoral Commission that still needs to step up in terms of the organization of elections so that people will have confidence in the system. And that's one thing that is seriously lacking. It is when there's confidence in the system that people can decide to come back after 4 years or after 2 years, after how many years as the case may be, to say, let's go again, even if we lost the last time, even if our candidate lost the last time, even if we came so close and just lost by a hair's breadth. But we can do it again this time, knowing that if people attack us, they will be apprehended, prosecuted, and jailed. We're found guilty, knowing that we'll be protected if we have any issues, knowing that there will be a clear and transparent trail of our votes from when we register to when we cast our vote to when the results are read in the polling units, transferred to wherever they eventually read and published, and then we have a winner selected. So even if our candidate wins or not, we know that there's transparency, we know that there's security, we know that there's a working system. These and many other things put together. I mean, it's a potpourri of so many things. There's the information part, there's the enlightenment part, and then there's a part of all of this put together as well. I think it's when we have a proper system flowing that people will continue to come out regardless of what happens the previous election. They'll continue to come out knowing that at some point their votes may count, at some point their presence would matter, at some point they will be well protected, and every other thing that should be in place will be in place. And if at the end they feel that, their candidate did not win for certain reasons that were funny, they can seek redress, knowing that, still added to this whole topic, that the justice system will take its place and do what is right. And if after the process is done, if their candidate is found worthy, he or she would eventually assume that position. But if he or she is not found worthy and doesn't win based on the results of the court, they can beat their chest and say, yes, we tried, we did the right thing. The evidence is there, the facts are there. It's time to step back, and brace for the next election. But again, it's a potpourri of so many issues that have to be put together for these things to eventually work.
Bernard, I want to say breathe.
Solid analysis.
You're so talk a lot at this point.
Solid analysis.
But you've said some very interesting things, very, very accurate actually. The fact is that while people are out there advocating, they can get physically hurt, but nobody ever got physically hurt on social media, which we saw was a very big tool that was used in the 2023 elections. And it wasn't spread across the country in a very, it wasn't paraded across the country. We saw this particularly in certain parts of the country, and the movements that was birthed from it. You talked about the articulates, Judith. I don't think I heard much noise or movement from the articulates like I did from the obedience. Now, noting that information was what drove that movement, and that movement was driven on social media, is this an endemic problem to certain parts of the country? Now, I'm crossing a very fine line here, but if you understand what I'm saying, we don't see that drive when it comes to elections in Ogun State, elections in Ondo State, but we only see it in certain parts of the country or when certain principles are involved. So what gives, Allwell?
Well, I mean, if you are talking about buzz around the election, I mean, there are several factors, right? And what if you have been studying how things trend on social media?
Let me recalibrate. Yes, I am talking about buzz. I'm talking about the movement that social media brings to politics in Nigeria. I'm talking about that new movement, new media movement, and why it doesn't seem to be something that is being utilized in these elections that we've just seen this weekend in Ogun and Ondo State. But with other parties and other principles peculiar to certain parts of the country, we see that this movement is very heavily utilized and effective so effective that it was a very big competition in the past election. So why don't we see it here in Ogun and Ondo State? Why is there no participation or movement on social media or the use of that tool at all? Because that's where the youth are.
Yeah. Let's get into that, because if you see how those movements go, you see that they are usually around some actors, right? I mean, we can do the analysis, say Edo election versus Ondo election. You realize that there were three main candidates in Ondo, and at least two of them were very active on social media. I mean, we had Aswe Godalo, we had Olumide Akpata, who had, they were active pushing their narrative on social media, and of course they had, their supporters around them, also pushing those narratives. I think it had to do with those actors. I mean, like, talk about the obedience. Just it gained that popularity, and then there's this mass movement of young people who are utilizing social media to push the narrative of the obedience. So for each election, it depends on the characters involved, right, and the issues involved, right? I mean, I remember before, weeks before the Edo election, the issues around the election trended on X, for instance. I mean, at point Akpata trended, at point as Godalo trended, and all that. And that's because beyond the candidates themselves, there were also other issues, all issues of godfatherism, Adams Oshomole in the mix and all that. So it is all of the actors in the mix in the election that sort of drive the narratives around the election on social media. You say that for Ondo, there wasn't so much of the narrative, because I didn't really see much of any of the two major candidates, doing much on social media, and so it was a bit more of an offline thing which they were doing. So which will not air so much interest on social media, and sometimes these narratives are not even mainly from the people from the states, right? I mean, if it's just left for the citizens of the state or residents of the state, it might not get so much buzz on media. So it means that the candidates involved in the election, but the people who are somehow out in some narrative that has national appeal or appeal beyond their locality, and that's where you can have that level of narrative around them on social media. I have that, a lot of people around it. So the actors are critical, and the issues around the election also determine that. So we didn't see much of that with this Ondo election, because a lot of people really outside Ondo were not so much aware that the election was going to happen.
Well, this has been sublime. Many thanks for doing this with us. Allwell Okpi, their researcher and community manager for Fact Check Africa. And also joining us was Bernard Akede, our correspondent, who was live on ground in Ogun State covering the local government elections. This has been a very insightful discussion, and we do hope that the key stakeholders are watching and Nigerians are watching. And so when the electoral reforms conversation come back on the table, we'll be able to there'll be a bit of insightful takeout from this conversations to be put on the table when that time comes. But once again, gentlemen, many thanks.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Welcome to the club, Allwell. Bernard. I'm that club.
Please.
Hey.
In the meantime, all right, guys, goodbye. But